comes from that. It just doesn't make any sense. So if you could stop that, that seems to me that'd be a really good thing. Now, solar's not the only solution. That's why I kind of wouldn't, say the first thing, because it's part of the solution. Mm-hmm. Now, a significant part, not the solution.
All right, so let's talk about energy services and what Shale described as Solar Plus. He teed up this conversation very nicely when he talked about how the leading solar companies are trying to get deeper into the home and businesses with energy services. You have, of course, for many years talked about being an energy services company, not a solar company. Many of your competitors and frenemies have described themselves in the same way. Of course, as Shale mentioned, you have the $20 million investment in Tendril, the partnership with Enernoc to offer to pair solar services with its energy management services for C&I customers. What is the end goal there for you? What does that mean in the context of these investments? What energy services mean in the context of these investments and partnerships?
Well, I think we all agree that distributed generation is incredibly disruptive. And when you talk to utilities, 5 or 6 years ago, they'd go distributed generation. In fact, I know this because I was speaking to them, would say, I'll quote one really big utility, said it's loony. And now today, they're going, how do I get in? So the disruptive nature of DG as costs have come down, and we're seeing the mainstreaming of solar, that a byproduct of that is a consumer can go from no control of their energy bill. Think of how all of you pay your energy bill today. It's just automated, right? You don't even know it, and it just gets paid. You go from zero control to total control. When you can control load and you have energy generation and you can shift that generation to when you want it, then software can optimize the two and you have total control. And it's very apparent that the technologies are going to be there to accomplish that. So what do we have to offer the end consumer? We have going from no control, just sort of a punitive, you get a bill, you pay it, to total control. Whether that's 5 years or 10 years, I don't know, but we will evolve there and we'll offer something that consumers want that's just very intuitive. So I think the opportunity to disrupt the way people get energy is so significant that SunPower needs to be at the forefront of that, and that's why we're investing in Tendril. We have partnership with SunVerge, partnership with Enernoc. All those things come together so that we can do that with both commercial and residential and do both load control and storage. But it's all about, Center is all about the consumer and giving them total control over their energy bill.
What was attractive to you about Tendril?
Tendril is the same thing that attracted me to SunPower. When I went to SunPower, I met the technology team, and they were theoretically sound. So when they had a problem, they would go back to, now, mind you, we were founded 30 years ago by Dr. Dick Swanson from Stanford, right? And he explained to me when I started, I said, Dick, how does a solar cell work? And about 10 seconds in, he said Schrodinger's wave equations. I'm like, oh, there's got to be an easier way to explain this. But SunPower was really theoretically sound in the way they went about designing a solar cell. So if something went wrong, we could go back to theory, not trial and error. And that's the same thing about Tendril. They have a physics engine that they've worked on over the last almost 10 years. And they've got hundreds of engineering years into modeling the way a house uses energy. And you can really profile a home, and you can do a lot with that. The most obvious thing is tell them, if you just made this one small change, you'd have a disproportionate impact on your energy bill. So it's the underpinning technology of Tendril that was so attractive to us.
Mm. Well, we can't have this conversation without talking about storage. Last year, you were at the Energy Storage Association's annual conference. You had a rousing speech about where storage is compared to solar, and of course, many people have said that storage is 5 to 10 years behind solar, but the business opportunity is there. But and SunPower has talked a lot about pilot programs and procuring storage on the residential side, but we really haven't seen much activity. It seems like in the industry and within SunPower, there's been more talk than action. What today have you succeeded in doing in storage that we might not know about?
Mm-hmm. So when I did that talk, I said storage would be economic in 5 years. And the good news is you can't determine the economics of storage just like you can't about solar generically. Depends on the application. And that was probably a bit optimistic. But what we've done is we have a new home program in California where we're putting storage in new homes.
That's with KB Homes?
That's with KB Homes, thank you. We also have a program in Australia where we're putting storage in the grid so you can aggregate excess energy from homes. So we've got those two pilots. We'll soon be doing something in Germany. And we have a partnership with both SunVerge and STEM, so it allows us to do those three things, and you can expect more from us.
And on the residential side, I mean, is the opportunity really there yet? Certainly the economics are not quite as clear as on the C&I side for reducing demand charges.
Yeah, the answer to your question is you have to be really concerned about having energy all the time. If it really matters a lot to you to have energy all the time, then you're going to pay for it. And so, you know, in commercial sector, of course, that might be a bank. We've put storage in Africa, and the economics are phenomenal, right? Because like a gas station, you know, as you mentioned, we're majority owned by Total. They have thousands of gas stations in Africa. When they have solar with storage, they have a competitive advantage over the other gas stations because they're up all the time. And when there isn't power, their station's up. So you have to take that analog over to residential. You have to have a consumer who, for whatever reason, says, I'm willing to pay 2 or 3x per kilowatt hour to have energy all of the time. I don't mean all that they would pay that all the time for the energy. It's just that which is stored would be 2 or 3x.
So taking this even further, a lot of people are talking about solar plus storage, plus load controllers, smart devices in the home, being the enablers of grid defection. And I personally find grid defection to be absurd. I think the customer barriers, I think people are not going to want to completely disconnect from the grid. But Rocky Mountain Institute put out a great report on the economics of grid defection, and more recently an updated report on load defection. And if you start to see, 3 to 5% reductions in load, you as a utility, you face some major challenges. What do you think about the concept of grid defection? How do you think about that?
Well, I think we're getting a little out in front of ourselves. We're a long ways off from storage, even if we're aggressive and we say 5 years, we've got a ways to go before we've got a fully integrated storage plus energy management plus generation. We have a complete solution where you're comfortable getting off the grid or defecting from the grid. And then what is your real objective there anyway? It would only be if the system was more economic, and we don't know that. So I think it's really premature and frankly not consistent with the physics of the overall system. We're going to need transmission for a very long time to balance DG with centralized generation. So let's not get out in front of ourselves too fast is what I'd say. And what's the end goal anyway? The end goal is to give consumer economic choice, and they will choose renewable energy if it's economic. So let's give them choice. Whether that's part of the grid or not, I don't think that's the key variable.
Let's shift gears here and talk about the Total investment. So Total owns 60% of the company. Why would an oil major like that make it such a big investment in solar when every other oil major is moving away from renewables and particularly solar?
Well, I think when you see this sort of thing, it requires leadership. And there's a leader at Total, the former CEO. Unfortunately, there was a tragic accident, so we lost the previous CEO. But he and one of his key lieutenants had a vision of carbon-free energy generation being an important part of what they could offer their customers. So the idea was to go to their customers, maybe it's a mining customer, and say, you're burning diesel now to make electricity, you can use solar and we'll offer that to you. They also had their own forecast. When you go out, we've all seen those, when you go out to 2030, 2040, 2050, solar increasingly is going to be a huge part of the energy generation. And if you're an oil company, which I've learned, they think in 10-year blocks. One of the first things they did is they asked me for a 10-year forecast, and I sort of said, are you serious? 10 years? I'll tell you what, I'll give you a 3-year forecast, and you fill in years 4 through 10.
Hey, I asked you for 20.
Yeah, you've got 5 through 20 then. So Total like a lot of energy companies, thinks in very long duration. And as they looked out to 2030, 2040, 2050, they see solar as being an important part of the energy mix and an important part of what they can offer their customers. And so if you travel the world now, if you go to Europe and Africa, you'll see in jetways and advertisements, Total, oil, gas, solar.
Yep.
So they're very committed. And you're right, that bucking the trend for sure.
Yeah, I actually saw those signs when I was in South Africa a few weeks ago. What do they provide you as a company? What strategic advantage does a company like Total give you?
Well, the timing of Total was pretty good, frankly. We all know that the solar energy industry went through some tough times in 2010, 2011 because of oversupply of panels. And our relationship with Total started not a little bit before that downturn. So Total gave us the obvious stability to make it through the downturn. The strength of balance sheet is really the halo effect, though. It's not like we get, the parent isn't writing a check for us or guaranteeing everything. It's the halo effect. We do have some balance sheet support from Total, but more importantly, we do research and development together. We do new market entry together. And the new market entry, they're in 130 countries. So imagine going to the Middle East, which I did, and you'd never been there before, and you're sort of winging it, versus going with Total, who's been there for 90 years. Huge difference, and that's true all over the Middle East and Africa. So it's a huge advantage in terms of market entry.
So it's no surprise that some of the biggest solar companies are vertically integrated and becoming increasingly so. When you look at what you would consider adding to the business, what are some attractive acquisitions or plays that would make you even more vertically integrated? Would you consider deeper battery services or even manufacturing? What areas are attractive to you that could strengthen the company or make it even more integrated?
Well, first, I would say the level of activity that SunPower's had in the last year has been pretty intense. And I would say going forward, it'll be at least that intense because things are evolving so fast. And, if I had to say broadly, it'll be downstream, not upstream, but I wouldn't say exclusively. We are open to what's going on throughout the value chain. The idea, of course, is that we would acquire or partner with a part of the value chain that is unique, sufficiently unique, against all of the other options. In other words, if there's a part of the value chain that's standardized, there's really no need to acquire or be part of that part of the value chain. So that's more than likely downstream. Think all the things that were talked about during the last hour, think what we call smart energy. So it's the partnerships we've already done, more of those. Now at a thoughtful pace, because we don't want to develop way faster than the market. We want to see, get some sense of how the market's evolving. But I think smart energy, so it's load management, integration of storage with load management, are all things we're interested in. We're interested in BOS. How do you reduce the cost of the installation of a system? The cost of a module is now a small percentage of the cost of the overall system. So mostly downstream and focused, but not exclusively.
You said you don't want to get ahead of yourself, and I'm just curious what you think about consumer preparedness for this energy future that everyone keeps talking about. So I surround myself with a lot of people who I consider very educated about energy issues and fairly progressive on these issues, but not many of them are really pining for the deep, customized energy solutions that everyone here keeps talking about. So are the solar companies farther ahead than the consumers? Or the other energy services companies operating in this sphere? I feel like people are, in my experience and from the people I talk to in my reporting, people are further behind than what the service providers and vendors are talking about. What's your opinion
Well, I
of that?
think if you go to an existing solar customer, so if we go to somebody who's bought a SunPower solar system or leased one, they've made a big financial commitment to generate renewable energy. So if we went to them and we said, we're going to save you $20 a month, or pick a number, I'll pick 20, $20 a month, you get 10, I get 10, we guarantee it. So on top of your solar system, we'll guarantee savings. You get 10, I get 10. And what's the downside to them? So I don't think the idea is to go to the mass market and say, hey, we've got this cool solar plus energy management plus storage, and because I tend to agree with you, that's going to be very difficult. I think the idea is to say people that have made that commitment to generate energy, then to offer them a service that makes complete economic sense. Once you've accomplished that, then you can go mainstream. And I couldn't agree more, though. There's been a lot of people going after this solution. So start small, start focused, get it to work, and then expand beyond that.
What's your opinion of the push on the state level for more energy choice? We've, of course, seen organizations like the Green Tea Party and conservative activists start to speak up and say they want to give consumers more choice with solar. And now that solar is cheap enough, people can feel like they can come out and talk about it in a different way than they did perhaps between 2009 and 2012 when it was seen as a big green boondoggle for many conservatives. I'm curious, beyond the politics of the issue, what's your opinion on the conversation around this customer choice, which I think has been very helpful for helping the industry grow on a policy level and open up new markets?
Well, I think we as a solar industry need to stop letting ourselves get beaten down by the people who have oversimplified arguments about, oh, it costs too much, or you have incentives, and giving oversimplified arguments. What we've done is we said, give us some incentives to scale the industry so we can get costs down, we can mainstream the industry, and then we'll no longer need those incentives. And we're delivering that. So what we need is exactly what you're saying. We need customer choice, and we need to level the playing field. This idea that solar has some kind of preferential treatment is a bunch of baloney, and we've got to be able to communicate that in an effective way. The big difference we have is that the other, the rules and regulations for the conventional generation are built into legislation, whereas solar incentives have to be voted on, as we're all painfully aware, in January of 2017. So if we can have customer choice and a level playing field over time, solar wins. And the good news is we collectively have delivered we've delivered on what we promised, which was give us scale and we'll get costs down. We've done that. So now we need to capitalize on that.
Why do you think solar is different for utilities? So one of our writers, Julia Piper, wrote a fantastic article where she interviewed an NRG executive who said, well, utilities love efficiency, but somehow solar is the bad guy. And you're really talking about them performing very similar tasks on the grid. Obviously, there's a much bigger grid management issue when you're talking about solar generation, but when you think about load reductions, they're very similar. Why is solar so different?
Well, I think you see utilities, like a lot of companies, sort of evolving strategically and determining how they're going to deal with distributed generation. And you see everything from fighting it to how do I get a big fixed charge and how do I get a rate structure that'll shut down DG, to embracing it. And you see almost every investor-owned utility with an unregulated side, the unregulated side getting into DG. So I think we're seeing utilities really decide what they want to do. But the economics of DG have changed so fast that it's so disruptive to utilities because of the load-reducing nature of it. So on the one extreme you have, oh my God, the economics have changed so fast, it's destroying my customer base, I can project where this is going, what do I do about it, I need to shut it down, to embracing it. And then you even see the regulated side of some investor-owned utilities turning distributed generation into a load reduction. So SoCal Edison has a program where they've used DG to reduce load with us in pockets of high load. So they can go out and they can say, on this circuit we have a lot of load, let's put some DG solar in. And we can reduce load. So there's an example of investor-owned utility that's really turned it around and said, how do we leverage this? But I think the answer to your question is the economics have changed so dramatically, so fast, that it's been difficult for the utilities to respond.
Okay, so wow, this half an hour has gone by very quickly. We only have a few minutes left. I wanted to ask you about your acquisition of Solar Bridge. So the combination of the Solar Bridge microinverter and your high efficiency panel gives you the highest cost product on the market. Why that acquisition of Solar Bridge, and what other values from the microgrid do you see through the combination of your panels and the microinverter?
I thought he was going to say something nice, but I think he just said highest cost. This is where you have to watch, the cost per watt, which very few people talk about anymore, and cost per kilowatt hour. And on a cost per kilowatt hour, of course, we compete. And so it's really about, as you add storage and energy management, then you want to produce more solar energy, because then it's worth more to you as the economics of storage improve. So as we optimize the system, which is a combination of those three things, having more energy is a big deal. And so having the highest efficiency panels on the planet, plus being able to do have a microinverter and all the advantages that you're going to talk about later today and tomorrow, and many of the companies are here in terms of microinverters improving the system performance. Combination of the two give you more solar energy that with storage I can then shift it to when I want to use it. And then with load control, I'm back to evolving to this idea of total control of my energy bill. So it's a long-term vision of the combination of the three things that made us make that move. And on a cost per kilowatt hour basis, we're completely economic.
Do you agree with ShaleCon's assessment that by 2020, the solar market is going to be barely recognizable by today's standards?
Absolutely. This is going to be phenomenal. I mean, it's rare that you can look ahead and say you're going to disrupt an industry, much less a multi-trillion-dollar industry. And we are part of that, and we can see it coming. This is going to be a hell of a ride. 5 years, we're going to look back and say we were like dinosaurs. It's unbelievable the amount of change in front of us. I couldn't agree more.
What's the hardest decision you've ever had to make as CEO of SunPower?
Oh, I was very close to, there were several on the way to IPO that, where we had issues in the field, and we're very close to stop shipping and pausing the whole company. And we chose to keep going and bet on our technologists to sort out some of our early challenges. So they're like a lot of startups. We had plenty of our near-death experiences where we're going to bet on the team, we're going to keep going. And at the time, it was kind of like blind faith almost. But that certainly was up there. Total was up there,
yep.
For sure, which in hindsight, right after it happened, that looked like a no-brainer. But right before it, can you imagine that we're going to announce to the employees we just took a controlling interest from a big French oil company? Right? So BFO, that was going to be a tough one to sell. So that would be another one.
All right, one more hypothetical. You're walking in the woods all alone. You come upon a briefcase with $1 million. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. Tom Werner, CEO of SunPower.